She was meant for another man. The cowboy married her after she escaped. She had always been told that her life was already decided. From the time she was young, her family spoke about her future as if it were a road already built, with no turns and no choices. They said she was lucky. They said many girls would be grateful for the life prepared for her. She listened quietly, nodding her head, even when her heart felt heavy. She learned early that saying no was not welcome in her world. The man she was meant to marry was known to everyone in their town. He came from a respected family, had steady work, and never caused trouble. On paper, he looked perfect. Her parents spoke of him with pride, as if his good name alone should bring her happiness. But whenever she thought of standing beside him for the rest of her life, a strange fear filled her chest. It was not that he was unkind. It was that she felt nothing at all. She tried many times to feel excited. She told herself that love was not important, that respect and security were enough. Older women around her said love grows with time. They said marriage was about responsibility, not feelings. She believed them because she wanted to. It felt easier than fighting everyone she loved. Still, late at night, when the house was quiet, she would stare at the ceiling and wonder why her future felt so empty. Her days became filled with preparations she never asked for. Family members visited often, bringing advice and expectations. They spoke about dates, plans, and responsibilities. She smiled when required, helped when asked, and stayed silent when her opinion was ignored. Inside, she felt like she was slowly disappearing. The girl she once was, who laughed freely and dreamed quietly, felt very far away. Sometimes she remembered small moments from her childhood, running barefoot in open fields, sitting alone and writing thoughts she never showed anyone. Back then, life felt wide and full of choices. Now it felt narrow, like a room with no windows. She wondered when exactly her voice had become so small. Her parents were not cruel people. They believed they were doing the right thing. They had grown up in a world where choices were limited and security mattered more than happiness. In their minds, they were protecting her. She understood that, and it made things harder. How could she explain her pain when they believed they were helping her? The man she was meant for tried to be polite. He spoke to her respectfully and never raised his voice. But their conversations felt forced, like lines learned by heart. When he spoke about the future, it was always about plans already decided, where they would live, how things would be done. There was no space for her thoughts, no questions about her dreams. She felt like a guest in her own life. As the wedding day grew closer, the pressure increased. People congratulated her everywhere she went. They said she looked lucky. They said she should be grateful. She thanked them with a weak smile. Each kind word felt heavier than the last. At night, her chest felt tight and sleep came slowly. She began waking up tired, even after long hours in bed. She started to notice small signs she could no longer ignore. Her hands shaking for no reason. Her appetite fading. A constant feeling of sadness she could not explain. Sometimes she would sit alone and feel tears fall without knowing why. She told herself it was stress. Everyone said it was normal before marriage, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. One evening, she overheard her parents talking about her future as if she were not even there. They spoke of responsibilities she would soon carry and expectations she must meet. Not once did they mention her happiness. Standing in the hallway, listening quietly, she felt something break inside her. It was not anger, it was clarity. For the first time, she asked herself an honest question. What would happen if she continued like this? She imagined herself years later, waking up beside a man she never chose, living a life that never felt like her own. The image frightened her more than disappointing her family ever could. Still, fear kept her silent. Leaving was not something people like her did. It would bring shame. It would hurt those she loved. The thought alone made her stomach turn. She tried to push it away to focus on what was expected of her. But once the idea entered her mind, it refused to leave. Days passed and the feeling grew stronger. Every step toward the wedding felt heavier than the last. She began to feel trapped, like time was moving forward while she stood still. Sometimes she looked at her reflection and barely recognized herself. Her eyes looked tired, her smile forced. One night, unable to sleep, she sat by the window and watched the quiet street below. The world looked peaceful, unaware of the storm inside her. She realized then that no one was coming to save her. No one would speak for her if she did not speak for herself. That thought scared her, but it also gave her strength. She didn't make a big plan. She didn't know where she would go or what she would do next. All she knew was that she could not stay. Staying felt like losing herself completely. Leaving felt terrifying, but it also felt honest. The next few days, she moved through her routine carefully, hiding her thoughts behind practiced smiles. Inside, she was saying goodbye to a life she never chose. She looked at familiar places with new eyes, knowing she might not see them again for a long time. There was sadness in that, but also relief. She packed only what she could carry, a few clothes, some personal items, nothing that would slow her down. Each item felt like a quiet promise to herself. She was not running away because she was weak. She was leaving because she wanted to live. When the moment finally came, her hands trembled, but her mind was clear. She took one last look around, feeling both guilt and courage mix in her chest. Her heart hurt for the people she was leaving behind, but it hurt more at the thought of staying. As she stepped away from the life planned for her, she didn't know what waited ahead. She only knew that for the first time the choice was hers, and that choice, though frightening, felt like freedom. The night she left, the world seemed both frightening and free. Every sound outside her small room felt louder than usual. The wind through the trees, the distant barking of a dog, the creak of the wooden floor under her feet, it all reminded her that she was alone. Alone, but finally choosing her own path. She held her small bag tightly, her fingers brushing over the few possessions she had packed. Each item was a reminder that she was leaving the life she had been forced into, but also stepping toward a life she might finally call her own. She walked carefully through the quiet streets, trying not to be seen. Every corner, every shadow made her heart beat faster. She remembered stories she had heard of people who had run away and been caught, or worse, who had lost everything because of one mistake. But she told herself that staying was the greater mistake. She could not stay in a life that had no room for her voice, her dreams, her heart. She would rather face uncertainty than remain a prisoner of someone else's plan. As she moved further from her home, the familiar landmarks disappeared one by one. The streetlights became sparse and the night felt deeper. She felt fear creeping in, but she also noticed a strange sense of excitement. The air felt fresher, freer. For the first time in her life, she was making a decision that belonged only to her. She did not know where she would go, where she would sleep, or what tomorrow would bring, but she knew she was finally moving forward on her own terms. She found a small bus station on the edge of town and bought a ticket to the nearest city. It was not far, but far enough to make her feel that she had escaped. On the bus, she sat quietly by the window, watching the darkness outside. The lights of the town faded into the distance, and for a moment she felt a pang of sadness. She was leaving her family behind, leaving the life she had known, and even leaving the man she was supposed to marry. The thought hurt, but only briefly. Deep down, she knew that staying would have hurt even more. The city she arrived in was different from her small town. The streets were brighter, the people moved faster, and everything seemed larger than life. She felt both overwhelmed and curious. She wandered the streets for hours, trying to find her bearings. Each turn she took felt like a small victory. She was discovering a world she had never seen before, and with each discovery, her confidence grew. She realized that life could be different from what she had been told. Life could belong to her. Finding a place to stay was not easy. Most hotels were expensive, and she did not have much money. She wandered until she found a small hostel that welcomed travelers who needed a temporary place. The room was tiny, with a simple bed and a window that looked onto a busy street. It was not luxurious, but it was safe. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without feeling watched or judged. She unpacked her bag slowly, arranging her belongings carefully. Everything she had brought felt precious because it symbolized her independence. During the next few days, she took small steps to build a new life. She found work as a cleaner in a small cafe, which paid just enough for food and the hostel. It was hard work, but she did not mind. Each task completed gave her a sense of accomplishment that she had never felt before. For the first time, she was working not because someone expected her to, but because she chose to. She learned to navigate the city, using buses and walking long distances. Every small challenge became a reminder that she was capable of more than she had been allowed to believe. Evenings were the hardest. After long days of work, she would return to her room and feel the quiet loneliness of her new life. Sometimes tears came uninvited, but she did not try to stop them. She allowed herself to feel. She remembered her family, her home, and the man she was supposed to marry. She remembered the expectations that had weighed on her for so long. And then she reminded herself that she had made the choice to leave, and that choice was hers alone. In the weeks that followed, she began to meet people in the city. Some were kind, some indifferent, but all were strangers who did not know her past. She found comfort in small friendships, smiles exchanged over coffee, brief conversations while waiting for the bus, a friendly nod from a shopkeeper. These interactions were ordinary, but they felt extraordinary to her. She had spent so much of her life being careful, hiding her feelings and following rules she had not chosen. Now, even the simplest human connection felt like freedom. One morning, while walking to work, she saw a ranch on the outskirts of the city. It was quiet and calm, with open fields and horses grazing under the sun. Something about it called to her. She had never been around animals much, but the sight of the open land and the slow, steady life of the ranch felt like a contrast to the crowded city streets. She stopped for a moment, watching the scene, feeling an unexpected sense of peace. She did not know why, but she felt drawn to it. Over the next few days, she returned to the ranch several times, hoping to talk to someone about work. She was shy and unsure, but eventually, a man who introduced himself as the ranch manager agreed to let her help with small tasks. It was not a permanent job, but it was something. She felt grateful for the chance, even if it meant doing hard work in the sun. Each day, as she cleaned the stables, fed the horses, and swept the barns, she felt her confidence growing. She realized that she could survive on her own and maybe even thrive. It was on one of these days that she first saw him, the cowboy. He was strong, calm, and worked quietly, but his presence had a kind of warmth that immediately caught her attention. He noticed her struggling with a heavy bale of hay and came over to help. His movements were steady, his voice gentle as he gave instructions. She was embarrassed at first, not used to asking for help, but he smiled and simply guided her without judgment. It was the first time in a long time that she felt seen as a person, not as someone who was supposed to follow a plan. Over the following weeks, she and the cowboy began to exchange small words. He asked about her day, offered advice when she needed it, and listened when she spoke. She did not reveal her past, but she felt comfortable around him in a way she had never felt with anyone else. There was no rush, no pressure, just quiet understanding. She noticed how he treated the animals, how he moved through the world with patience and care. Watching him, she began to feel hope, a sense that maybe, one day, life could be different from what she had been taught. The cowboy's kindness and calm presence started to fill a space in her heart that had been empty for years. She began to look forward to each day on the ranch, not just for the work, but for the quiet moments she could share with him. Sometimes, while feeding the horses together, he would tell a simple story from his past, and she would listen, feeling the weight of her own burdens lift slightly. She realized that people could be good, even in a world that had often seemed harsh and unfair. One afternoon, as the sun began to set, they sat together on the porch of the ranch house. The sky was painted with colors she had never noticed before, the deep oranges, soft pinks, and gentle purples of the evening. For a moment, words were not needed. She felt safe, seen, and free, all at once. It was the first time she had allowed herself to imagine a life beyond running and hiding. She could picture herself laughing again, waking up without fear and feeling hope in her chest. Even as life slowly became steadier, she never forgot the past she had escaped. Memories of her old life, her family's expectations, and the man she was meant to marry would come in quiet waves. But instead of fear or sadness, she learned to face them with strength. She reminded herself daily that she had made a choice for herself, and that choice was brave. Each day, she felt more capable of shaping her future, even if the path was unknown. The days turned into weeks, and she found a rhythm in her new life. Work on the ranch, small friendships in the city, and quiet evenings in her small room became her routine. The fear that had once followed her everywhere began to fade. She realized that courage was not about never being afraid. It was about taking steps forward even when fear existed. She had learned that leaving her old life behind was not weakness. It was the first step toward living fully. One evening, as she finished her chores and watched the stars appear one by one in the dark sky, she felt a quiet sense of peace. Life was uncertain, and challenges were still ahead, but for the first time, she felt that the future belonged to her. She had taken control of her life, even when the world told her she could not. And though she did not know what awaited her next, she felt ready. Ready to face life on her own terms, ready to discover who she truly was, and ready for the unexpected journey that lay ahead. She had escaped a life that was chosen for her, and in that escape, she found something greater than freedom. She found herself. She had been at the ranch for a few months now, and each day felt like a small step into a life she could finally call her own. The work was demanding, but it gave her a sense of purpose she had never known before. Feeding the horses, mending fences, and helping with chores kept her busy, and she liked the feeling of accomplishing something on her own. She realized that life could be simple and honest, and that there was satisfaction in earning each day's comfort through hard work. The cowboy had become a quiet presence in her days. She had learned his name, though he had never asked much about hers at first. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were calm and thoughtful. He noticed the smallest details, the way she struggled with lifting a heavy sack of feed, the way she hesitated when approaching a new task, or the way her eyes lit up when she succeeded. He never criticized her, never made her feel small. Instead, he guided her with patience and kindness, teaching her skills she had never imagined learning. It was during one of these long afternoons, while painting a fence under the sun, that she realized something had shifted inside her. She felt a quiet joy in the simple work, but also in the presence of the cowboy. She noticed the way he moved, steady, confident, careful, and felt a strange warmth in her chest whenever he smiled at her. She tried to ignore it at first, telling herself that she was not ready for attachment, that she needed to focus on her independence. But the feeling kept returning, subtle but persistent, like a soft wind that could not be ignored. One evening, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the cowboy called her over to help with the horses. The day had been long and both of them were tired, but there was a calmness in the air. She followed him to the pasture, and together they guided the horses back to the stable. He moved beside her in silence, and for a moment she felt that no words were necessary. She was grateful for his presence, for the steady reassurance that came simply from being near him. As weeks turned into months, their friendship grew. It was quiet and natural, without pressure or expectation. The cowboy would sometimes offer her water after long work, or ask her opinion on small decisions around the ranch. He listened when she spoke, and she realized that she could speak freely without fear of judgment. That in itself was something she had never experienced before. She had spent so much of her life following rules and meeting expectations, and now she was learning that her thoughts and feelings mattered. She began to open up slowly. One afternoon, while mending a fence together, she shared a little about her past. Not everything, but enough to let him understand that she had not always lived a free life. She expected him to judge her or perhaps feel distant, but he only nodded, listening with a quiet respect. "Everyone has a story," he said simply. "We all have times when we had to make hard choices. What matters is what we do next." His words stayed with her, and for the first time, she felt a sense of understanding and acceptance that she had never known before. The days on the ranch became a routine she cherished. She learned to ride horses, to care for the animals, and to handle tools she had never touched before. Each skill gave her confidence. Each completed task reminded her that she was capable of more than she had believed. And through it all, the cowboy was there, not controlling her, not telling her what to do, but showing by example how to move through life with patience and respect. One day, a storm rolled in unexpectedly. The sky darkened and the wind began to howl across the fields. She was frightened, not of the storm itself, but of being unprepared. The cowboy noticed her hesitation and offered to help. Together, they secured the animals, tied down equipment, and made sure the barn was safe. It was exhausting work, but as they stood side by side, watching the storm from the safety of the barn, she felt a sense of partnership she had never experienced. It was not romantic yet, not in the way she understood romance, but it was a connection rooted in trust and shared experience. Evenings after the work was done became moments she looked forward to. They would sit on the porch, sometimes in silence, sometimes talking about small things, the weather, the animals, or stories from their lives. She learned about his past too, though not everything. He spoke of his childhood, his family, and how he had come to run the ranch. She listened, fascinated by the strength it must have taken to build a life in such a demanding environment. She realized that courage came in many forms, not just in running away, but in staying, in facing challenges, and in living honestly. There was one moment that stood out to her. One late afternoon, the sun was low, casting long shadows across the pasture. She had been struggling to lift a heavy bale of hay, and the cowboy had noticed. He came over without a word, lifted the bale effortlessly, and placed it where it needed to go. She looked at him, realizing that his help was not a sign of weakness on her part, but of partnership. For the first time, she understood that needing help did not make her less capable, it made her human. She began to feel a quiet attachment growing, though she did not name it as love. It was a feeling of safety, of being understood, of being seen. She found herself looking forward to the moments when he was near, noticing the small kindnesses he offered, the calm way he handled every situation. And yet, she reminded herself that she needed to remain cautious. Her past had taught her to trust carefully, and she knew that her freedom was fragile. She could not allow herself to lose control of her life again, even for someone kind. One afternoon, while walking along a dirt path to the barn, she stumbled and twisted her ankle. Pain shot through her leg and she fell to the ground. The cowboy was immediately at her side, helping her to stand and examining the injury with concern. He carried her back to the house carefully, speaking in a calm voice, reassuring her that everything would be okay. That small act of care, simple as it was, made her heart swell with gratitude. She realized that he was not only strong in body but in character. He protected without controlling, cared without demanding. During her recovery, they spent more time together in quiet ways. She learned to cook small meals, to clean the house, and to care for herself in ways that she had never prioritized before. The cowboy never pressured her, never questioned her decisions. He simply offered guidance when needed and let her grow at her own pace. It was a slow, steady process, but she noticed that each day she felt stronger, more capable, and more comfortable in her own skin. It was also during this time that she began to notice small moments of joy that had nothing to do with work. The sound of the horses' hooves, the smell of fresh hay, the way sunlight filtered through the trees. She began to see beauty in ordinary things, beauty she had missed when her life had been filled with fear and obligation. The cowboy seemed to notice these moments too. He would smile quietly, sometimes pause to watch the sunset, and share these small pleasures with her. Together, they experienced life in a way that was simple, real, and grounding. Slowly, she began to imagine a future beyond running and hiding. She began to picture herself waking up not in fear, but in peace. She began to think about what it would mean to trust someone, not blindly, but carefully. She thought about the possibility of companionship, of a life shared with someone who respected her choices. These thoughts frightened her, but they also gave her hope. She realized that love, real love, could exist without pressure or expectation. It could grow from understanding, respect, and shared experience. The cowboy remained a quiet presence in her life, never rushing, never demanding. She admired that about him. He had lived through challenges of his own, yet he carried himself with calm strength. She found herself wanting to share her thoughts, her fears, her dreams, even in small ways. And when she did, he listened, never judging, never dismissing. She began to understand that a connection like this was rare, built not on grand gestures or dramatic words, but on steady presence and shared trust. By the end of the season, she had grown in ways she had never imagined. She was stronger, more confident, and more independent. She had learned new skills, faced challenges, and discovered that she could thrive on her own. And yet, in the midst of all this growth, she found herself thinking of the cowboy more and more, not in a way that frightened her, but in a way that felt natural. She realized that the heart could heal, could trust, and could grow, even after being hurt and constrained for so long. One quiet evening, she stood on the porch, watching the sky turn golden with the setting sun. The cowboy joined her, and they stood side by side in comfortable silence. No words were needed. In that moment, she realized how far she had come, from a life dictated by others to a life she was shaping herself. And she realized that she had found someone who could walk beside her, not ahead, not behind, but alongside. Someone who could share her journey, respect her choices, and understand her heart. For the first time in her life, she felt that love and freedom could coexist. She had escaped a life that was never hers, and now she was building a new one, strong, independent, and full of quiet possibilities. And in that new life, she had found a companion who made the journey lighter, safer, and unexpectedly joyful. As the months passed, her life on the ranch became steadier, but also richer in ways she had never imagined. The work remained hard, but it no longer felt like a burden. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and quiet satisfaction. She found joy in simple routines: the smell of fresh hay in the morning, the soft neighing of the horses, the sound of the wind moving through the open fields. Every task, no matter how small, reminded her that she was capable, independent, and free. The cowboy had become a constant presence in her life. He never demanded attention, never imposed his will, but his support was steady and unwavering. Whether helping her with heavy tasks, showing her how to handle animals safely, or simply being near while she worked, his presence was a quiet comfort. She had learned to trust him in ways she had never trusted anyone before. Trust was not something she had given freely in her past life, but here, with him, it came naturally, slowly, and without fear. One afternoon, they were repairing a fence together. The sun was warm on their backs, the birds chirping quietly in the distance. She struggled with a particularly stubborn post, but he came to help without hesitation. "Here, let me show you a trick," he said gently, demonstrating how to secure it correctly. She watched closely, then tried again. This time it went smoothly. She smiled, feeling a mix of pride and relief. He nodded at her, a small smile on his face, and for a moment the world felt perfect in its simplicity. The bond between them grew steadily. They began to share more about their pasts, in small pieces at first. She spoke cautiously, revealing enough for him to understand but not enough to feel vulnerable. He listened without judgment, sometimes offering gentle advice, sometimes simply letting her words hang in the air. She felt safe with him, safe enough to admit fears she had carried for years. It was a strange, new feeling, freedom not only to act but to feel. One evening, as they sat by the barn after a long day, she found herself talking about her family. She described her childhood, the expectations placed on her, and the man she had been meant to marry. Her voice trembled at times, but he never flinched, never made her feel ashamed. Instead, he offered a quiet understanding. "You made a brave choice," he said softly. "It was hard to leave, but you did what you needed to do. That's strength, not weakness." She felt tears sting her eyes, but this time they were not only of sadness. They were of relief, of recognition, of finally being understood. As weeks turned into months, they began to share more ordinary moments, cooking meals together, repairing tools, or sitting quietly to watch the sunset. She noticed that these moments, though simple, carried a weight she had never felt before. They were built on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. She realized that love did not need to be dramatic or rushed. It could grow slowly, like the grass in the field she walked every day, steady, patient, and strong. One day, a problem arose at the ranch. A sick horse needed special attention, and she was tasked with helping care for it. She felt nervous, unsure if she could handle the responsibility. The cowboy noticed her hesitation and offered guidance without criticism. Together, they tended to the horse, checking its health, giving it water, and ensuring it was comfortable. Her hands shook at first, but by the end of the day, she felt a sense of accomplishment she had never known. The cowboy looked at her with pride in his eyes, and she realized that he believed in her, sometimes more than she believed in herself. As her confidence grew, so did her feelings for him. She noticed the small ways he cared, how he always checked to see if she had eaten, how he noticed when she was tired, how he remembered small details about her stories. It was subtle, quiet, but it left a mark on her heart. She struggled with her emotions at first, afraid of losing her independence or making a mistake. But she began to understand that loving someone did not mean giving up control of her life. It could mean sharing it with someone who respected her freedom and choices. One rainy afternoon, they were stuck inside the barn, the rain beating heavily on the roof. She was tense, worried about the animals and the chores that needed to be done. The cowboy noticed and simply placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and reassuring. "We'll manage," he said calmly, "one step at a time." His words were simple, but they carried a weight she had never felt before. She realized that part of love was trust, not only trusting him, but trusting herself to let someone in without losing herself. Their bond grew deeper with every shared experience. They celebrated small successes together, the first healthy foal of the season, a repaired fence that had been broken in the storm, or a day when all the chores were completed without mishap. She realized that these victories, though ordinary, felt extraordinary when shared with someone who truly cared. She began to imagine a life built not on fear or obligation, but on partnership, respect, and mutual support. One evening, she found herself sitting quietly, reflecting on how far she had come. A few months ago, she had been terrified, alone, and uncertain. Now she had a job she enjoyed, skills she had never imagined learning, and a companion who respected her choices and saw her worth. She realized that escaping her old life had been the first step toward discovering herself. She had learned that courage was not only about leaving the past behind, but also about allowing new possibilities into her life. There were moments of doubt, of course. Sometimes memories of her old life resurfaced, her family, the man she had been meant to marry, and the expectations she had escaped. These thoughts brought sadness and worry, but she faced them without fear. She reminded herself that she had chosen freedom, and that her future was now hers to shape. The cowboy never pressured her to forget her past or pretend it did not exist. He simply supported her, allowing her to process her feelings at her own pace. Slowly she began to feel a quiet love forming, not dramatic or loud, but steady, patient, and real. She admired his strength, his calmness, and his ability to care without controlling. She felt gratitude for his patience, his understanding, and the way he respected her independence. She realized that love did not have to feel like a trap or a cage. It could be gentle, kind, and empowering, and it could grow alongside freedom rather than replacing it. One sunny morning, they worked together in the fields, repairing a section of the fence that had been damaged during the storm. She struggled with one heavy post, and he came to help, placing his hands over hers to guide the work. She felt a rush of warmth and gratitude, realizing that she could rely on someone without losing herself. It was a lesson she had never truly learned before. That partnership meant sharing burdens, not surrendering autonomy. As the season changed, she began to notice the subtle ways in which the cowboy's presence had become essential to her life. His calm guidance, his quiet understanding, and his steady support made daily challenges easier to face. She realized that she had found more than companionship. She had found someone who could walk beside her in life's journey, respecting her choices while offering strength when needed. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat together on the porch, watching the sun set behind the distant hills. The air was warm, the sky painted in soft shades of orange and pink. She felt a sense of peace she had never known, a combination of safety, independence, and connection. She realized that she could trust him, and in that trust, she found a freedom that went beyond escaping her past. She understood that love could exist without fear, that partnership could be gentle, and that her heart could heal while remaining strong. She thought about her old life and the man she had been meant to marry. For a long time, she had wondered if she would ever feel truly safe or loved. Now, she saw that she could. Not because anyone forced it, but because she had chosen to let herself be open to trust and companionship. She had learned that courage and love were not opposites. They could coexist, growing quietly and steadily, one day at a time. In the following weeks, their connection deepened further. They worked together seamlessly, shared small joys, and faced challenges as a team. She learned to rely on him, not as a crutch, but as a partner. He learned to understand her fears, her hopes, and her dreams. They communicated without pressure, shared space without conflict, and built trust without haste. It was a slow, patient process, but it was real and it was strong. By the end of the season, she realized that her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. She was independent, skilled, and confident. She had found a man who respected her choices, supported her growth, and made her feel safe and valued. Most importantly, she had learned that love did not have to be rushed or forced. It could grow from understanding, trust, and shared experience. And in that love, she discovered the possibility of happiness she had once thought impossible. She sat on the porch one evening, the last light of the sun fading behind the hills, and felt a quiet gratitude. Life had tested her, challenged her, and led her to a place she could finally call her own. The cowboy had become more than a companion. He was a witness to her courage, a partner in her journey, and a presence that brought calm to her heart. She knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, she could face them with him beside her, not because she needed saving, but because together they were stronger. For the first time, she imagined a future where she could be happy, free, and loved, all at once. A future where she did not have to choose between independence and connection, between freedom and love. She realized that the life she had built, step by step, choice by choice, was one she could be proud of. And she knew that with patience, trust, and care, the love she felt for the cowboy could grow into something lasting, steady, and real. Time passed, and life on the ranch had become a steady rhythm she had grown to love. Each day brought work, small victories, and moments of quiet joy. She had grown strong, independent, and confident in herself, but the deepest change was not in her skills or her courage, it was in her heart. She had learned to trust, to rely on someone, and to allow herself to feel love without fear. The cowboy had become more than a companion. He had become a presence she could not imagine her life without. She often reflected on how far she had come. Just a year ago, she had been trapped in a life that was never hers, preparing to marry a man she did not love. Now, she lived each day on her own terms, with work she enjoyed, friends she could trust, and a man who respected her choices and supported her growth. The freedom she had sought for so long was no longer a distant dream, it was her reality, and she cherished every moment of it. The decision to marry the cowboy was not sudden. It was not a response to pressure, nor was it a solution to loneliness. It was the natural result of months spent building trust, understanding, and deep connection. She had learned that love was not about grand gestures or dramatic confessions. It was about steady presence, shared experiences, and mutual respect. She had seen it grow slowly, quietly, and now it had become undeniable. The cowboy approached her one evening while she was tending to the horses. The sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow across the fields. He did not speak immediately, simply watching her with a quiet intensity that made her heart beat faster. Then he said, "I want to spend my life with you. Not because I need to protect you or because I want to control your life, but because I want to walk beside you. Will you marry me?" Her heart swelled with emotion. She had expected a question like this to come one day, but when it did, it was even more meaningful than she had imagined. She could see the sincerity in his eyes, the patience, the respect, the love that had grown steadily over time. She knew that this was not a choice made out of convenience or obligation. This was a choice made from understanding, shared trust, and genuine connection. With a quiet smile, she said yes. The wedding was simple, reflecting the life they had built together rather than extravagance or ceremony. Friends from the ranch, a few neighbors, and those who had become part of their new life gathered to celebrate. There were no grand decorations, no lavish parties, just open fields, clear skies, and the presence of people who truly cared. It was perfect in its simplicity. She wore a modest dress that made her feel comfortable and herself, and he wore his usual ranch clothes, tidy and respectful. The ceremony itself was intimate and heartfelt. There were no long speeches or forced traditions. The words they exchanged were simple, honest, and full of meaning. "I promise to respect you, support you, and walk beside you always," he said. "I promise to honor your choices and your freedom, and to share life's joys and challenges with you." She repeated similar vows, each word reflecting the courage, trust, and growth that had brought them to this day. After the ceremony, they walked together through the open fields, hand in hand. The sky was clear, and the air smelled of fresh grass and earth. She realized how far she had come, from a life dictated by others to a life she had chosen for herself. Every step she took beside him was a step into a future she had shaped, a future filled with love, trust, and partnership. She felt joy, relief, and deep gratitude all at once. The honeymoon was simple, spent in a small cabin near the ranch. There were no grand hotels or elaborate plans, only quiet mornings, shared meals, and long walks through the surrounding countryside. They spent hours talking about their dreams, their hopes for the future, and the life they wanted to build together. For her, these days were magical, not because of extravagance, but because of the genuine connection and understanding they shared. She had never felt so safe, so seen, and so loved. Over time, life settled into a rhythm that was familiar yet enriched by love. They worked together on the ranch, cared for the animals, and built a home that reflected both of their personalities. She learned new skills, and he learned to trust her judgment in ways he had never expected. Together they faced challenges, storms, sick animals, and occasional difficulties, but always with patience, teamwork, and understanding. Each challenge strengthened their bond rather than weakening it. She often thought about her past and the life she had left behind. Memories of her family, the man she had been meant to marry, and the expectations she had escaped would come unexpectedly. At first, they brought sadness, but over time, they became reminders of her courage. She had made a choice for herself, and that choice had led her to a life far better than anything she could have imagined. She had discovered that freedom, independence, and love could coexist, and that she could have a partner who respected and nurtured all of it. The cowboy became not just a partner but a true companion. He listened when she spoke, supported her decisions, and celebrated her successes. He never sought to control her or diminish her independence. Instead, he offered strength when needed, guidance when asked, and constant presence when desired. She realized that this was the essence of love, the ability to walk together equally through life's joys and challenges. Years passed and the ranch flourished under their care. They built a home together, filled with warmth, laughter, and memories of shared experiences. Each day brought opportunities to grow, not just in their work but in their relationship. They learned to communicate openly, to compromise, and to support each other's dreams. She felt proud of the life they had built, a life rooted in choice, courage, and love. Their love continued to deepen. Simple gestures, a shared cup of coffee in the morning, a quiet walk through the fields, a helping hand during chores, became symbols of the connection they had nurtured over time. She realized that love was not about grand declarations, but about daily acts of care, respect, and understanding. It was steady, patient, and real, and she cherished it more deeply than she had ever thought possible. She also noticed how much she had grown as a person. She was no longer the fearful, uncertain girl who had left her old life behind. She was confident, capable, and self-assured. She had learned to face challenges, trust herself, and embrace her choices. The cowboy had been part of that growth, but she knew that the courage had always been hers. She had chosen to leave, chosen to face uncertainty, and chosen to build a life on her own terms. The community around the ranch came to admire their partnership. Friends and neighbors noticed the respect, understanding, and teamwork that defined their relationship. They saw a couple who worked together, celebrated together, and faced challenges together, always with patience and care. She felt proud not only of their love, but of the life they had built, a life that reflected freedom, respect, and mutual support. Occasionally, she thought about the man she had been meant to marry and the life she had escaped. It no longer brought fear or regret. Instead, it brought clarity. She had chosen a life filled with meaning, trust, and love. She had discovered that true happiness came not from following a path laid out by others, but from choosing her own way. And in that choice, she had found the love of her life. On quiet evenings, as they sat together on the porch or walked through the fields, she often reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the fear, uncertainty, and loneliness of her escape, and marveled at how far she had come. She had faced the unknown, trusted herself, and opened her heart to someone who truly valued her. And in doing so, she had discovered a life far richer than anything she had ever imagined. In the end, she realized that freedom and love were not opposites. They could coexist beautifully. She had learned that she could be independent and loved, brave and cherished, free and connected. Her journey had not been easy, but it had been worth every step. She had chosen herself, built a life she could be proud of, and found a partner who walked beside her with patience, respect, and unwavering care. Together, they faced the future with confidence, knowing that whatever challenges came their way, they would meet them as a team. They had built a life on trust, understanding, and mutual respect, a life that reflected their choices, their courage, and their love. And she knew, without a doubt, that this was the life she had always deserved, a life of freedom, happiness, and real love. In the quiet moments, watching the sun set over the ranch, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. She had escaped a life that was never hers, discovered her strength, and chosen a path that led to true happiness. And in the cowboy, she had found a partner who respected her independence, supported her growth, and loved her genuinely. It was a life she had built with courage, patience, and heart, a life she would never let go.